What's up, party people? Today we are analyzing a game called Torment Tides of Numenara. And this is a game that really doesn't care too much about your feelings. It's really a fantastic game, and it's an incredible piece of storytelling that you shouldn't miss. And I say that because I almost did. It's an isometric, turn-based combat RPG, and it's easy to overlook a game like this, especially if you think about a more intense action-based RPG such as The Witcher, Fallout, any of the Elder Scrolls games. There's also like a game that came out about the same time as this called Elix, and that was a post-apocalyptic RPG. And that's from the folks that also brought you the Gothic series. And, there's just so many other games that you could pick that have a lot more action. So, why would you pick this game? I mean, there's obviously a sense of strategy in how you manage your characters during combat. But, this really had me thinking about what isometric RPGs do better than an action game such as The Witcher, or even like a JRPG. Those very kind of hard turn-based RPGs. And I'll talk a little bit about what conclusions I came to in a moment. But I want to say that I almost missed playing Numenara, and the thing that has come to most endear me to this game was what at first was a major turnoff and would potentially drive me away. And that was how utterly lost that I felt when I first started the game. The world of Numenara, it's rather forgiving as a video game, but it is completely foreign. And it took me a little while to be okay with that. So just a brief list of the things that were, that had a learning curve for me going into this game. The lore of this universe is completely different than anything that I've ever encountered. The character classes were also novel. They're interesting. You've got a glaive, a jack, and some kind of caster. I forget what they're called. There are these things called ciphers in the game, which are like magic items, except you can only use them one time. And that adds a really interesting dynamic to this game. You know that if you use this item, it's never coming back. So there's this kind of cool balance of like being a bit of a hoarder, while also taking them, waiting for the best opportunities to use these cool, crazy magic items. There's also some skills and abilities that are unique to this game. One of the coolest ones is a skill called, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but Amnesia. And that skill is the chance to randomly recall something that you've learned or encountered in a past life. So in this game, the idea is that everybody has like cycled through thousands and thousands of lives, and every time you come back, you're in a different form. It's not like a religious karmic reincarnation kind of a thing. It's more just about technology and energy. But anyway, with that skill, and you can actually level it up, there's a greater chance that you'll remember things such as foreign languages, such as lore, and that you just randomly get insights into things based on that skill. It's really, really cool. And then the last thing I'll talk about that's kind of foreign is the dice pool system. It's kind of cool because you can use your dice to add to the likelihood that you'll pass a check, but once you spin those dice, they're gone until you rest. So it's kind of neat because you won't always have the same chance to pass, for instance, a charisma check. But if you want to add some of your dice pool to that check, you will increase the likelihood. But if you're like stuck down in a dungeon or something like that, you won't be able to get that dice pool back. And it's just a cool mechanic. It certainly makes things much more tense and interesting as you kind of start burning through your dice pools. And that's just to name a few of the game mechanics that are different. Now, game mechanics aside, the lore of Numenera, it feels infinitely vast, and it's kind of wild how overwhelming it can feel sometimes to just try to like get your head around what the hell is going on. At first, it felt if my footing was really unsure, and it was a strange universe. There were like walls that had eyeballs. There were like these sentient machines that have been frozen in time for over 10,000 years, but they're still alive and can talk to you. There was this dude who had like toes just spontaneously growing on his body. These kinds of things are like just coming at you all the time as you play Numenera. And like I said, for me at first, I was just like, man, I don't know anything about this universe. I feel completely lost. And it wasn't until I really just accepted that that's how this game was going to play out that I really started having fun. And then you were just like, oh, here's some more kind of crazy shit that's coming. Oh my god. I didn't know that, this person had this skill or ability. Oh man, someone just crawled out from the rubble of a building and joined my team. So you just gotta like roll with the fact that things are completely different and be okay with that, and you're gonna have a great time with this game. So the lore and the crazy events, they're a bit much to take in at first, but eventually it really will become what would draw you back into the game. What kind of crazy alien race are you going to run into next? What physics-altering ciphers will you encounter? And, which kind of crazy interdimensional character are you going to invite into your party? All of these things make Numenera a really kind of exciting world to be in. What I also loved about this game was how the visuals and the writing are really beautifully paired, and they can really transport you into a new and compelling world, provided that you're able to read. You're going to need to read a lot. And I do mean a lot. But that text and the visuals, again, for me, it really helps to draw me into this world. And it makes for a really unique experience when you really take the time to read the writing and appreciate what the writers have done in this game. If you contrast this game, or at least the writing, so contrast the writing of Numenera with a game like Divinity, and you can see how text can be used in an RPG to really flesh out the world you find yourself in. So Divinity, you can also think Diablo. I mean, those games are text light when you compare it to a game like this. And this game uses that text to paint a picture for all of your senses. And in my opinion, it really does a lot to draw you into the world. And, for a long time, I haven't liked isometric games, but this is really starting to help me understand, why people love them, but also kind of why I'm beginning to enjoy them. Another contrast to draw between Numenera and Divinity, I mean, you could also think about Pillars of Eternity, is that you don't get to take anything for granted in the world of Numenera. There aren't any familiar RPG tropes that you can lean on. Everything gets turned upside down and then chopped into a billion pieces, and then they get glued back together by a blind chimpanzee who just happens to be really high on acid. But that's again why it's such a compelling game. Now, when you think of isometric games, a game that has this bird's eye view, what do you think? Are they games that you enjoy? Are there a few that you like, a few that you don't? And again, I ask, I've never been a huge fan of this type of RPG. As a matter of fact, I can count the number of isometric RPGs I've played, at least like to finish, on one hand. And that would be Neverwinter Nights, Shadowrun, the new Shadowrun series, the Divinity Remastered, Diablo 3. I didn't play much of Pillars of Eternity. I don't think I gave it the chance that it deserves, having gone through this, which would be my 5th game that I've played a lot of. And, this type of game, it's such a mainstay of RPGs in the West. There are tons of folks who love these types of games, who grew up, and when they think of an RPG, this is what they think of. Like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, that Planescape. Is it called Torment? Planescape Torment. For a lot of folks, like that's what RPGs look like, and that's how they are. And growing up in the 80s and 90s, there were a ton of these titles, and when I tried them, I didn't like them, and I'll tell you why. One is that there was this sense of limitation. You had just this area to go to, and there were only certain things that you could interact with. And obviously, each game has a limitation of some kind, right? But if you compare the types of choices and freedom that you get with more action-oriented games, sort of like the Elder Scrolls series, Arx Fatalis was one that came to mind. That was an older one. But games like those, for me, was just a lot more fun, and it gave me that sense of freedom that I'm really interested in a video game. But what am I missing out on, right? What did I miss out on? So, for a game like the older isometric RPGs, you're getting a lot of this kind of like strategy in your combat system. So you've really got to think about who goes where and what they do. So that's kind of cool, right? You have some strategy involved, but you really get a tight-knit story. And I would argue, and I'd love to hear what you think, but I would argue that that's really the major appeal of these games. They're told in a very tight way, and the text allows you to paint a picture that go beyond the visuals. So things go a lot more deeply when you can write and pair that writing with what's happening on screen at that moment. So I can see that now. That's really what the isometric video game does. And you can think of it sort of like on a continuum of sorts. You've got like a straight up pure turn-based RPG where you don't move a whole lot. And I'm thinking like a game like Final Fantasy VII, right? You're stuck on this kind of like 2D battlefield, and everyone's taking turns. And then you've got a game like Baldur's Gate, where it really matters where your character moves in space, and that's sort of like the next step up as far as like freedom of movement, in especially during combat. And then you come to a game like Elder Scrolls Daggerfall, right? Where your character is moving through 3D space, and you feel at least a lot more freedom in where you can go and things like that. So for me, that's sort of the continuum. And what I have come to realize and appreciate, each of those ways of telling an RPG, the story, offer you options. They offer you storytelling options. They offer gameplay options. And they offer different senses of satisfaction based on maybe what you're interested in. And if I'm honest with myself, I've kind of like picked up games from all three of those genres, or those three types of RPG continuums, and I've had a blast. It sort of depends on my mood. Do I want something that's more kind of slow paced, like a turn-based RPG where you really have to take your time, dig into the characters, and you know that that's the combat system that you're going to have. Maybe I'm really interested in the strategy plus the tight storytelling that you get in a game like Divinity or Tides of Numenara. And then sometimes you just want to like hack and slash and have a great action RPG type of game, like Witcher 3, those types of games. So, there's room for all three. And I think it's important to appreciate what each has to offer. But for me, my biggest learning curve has been this top-down view. And I'm finally starting to get it. The storytelling, the strategy, those are the things that make these games stand out in a way that, an action RPG just doesn't get to compete with. So thanks, guys, for hanging out with me. I'm really curious, from your point of view, which of those three types of RPGs, which of those three do you most appreciate, and why? And did I miss anything in my analysis of isometric games? Those of you who really kind of dig into these and play every one of them that comes out, I'll be interested to hear what you say. Thanks again, guys, for hanging out. Till next time, it's the Chill Gamer wishing you happy analysis.